Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the NowSecure Tech Talk for July. My name is Brendan Hahn. I'm Senior Product Marketing Manager here at NowSecure, and I'll be your host for today. I'm joined by Jason, who is the lead cybersecurity engineer and attack for mobile lead from MITRE to talk about updates you need to know to their mobile framework. A few quick housekeeping items before we start as folks join. We will have Q&A at the end of the Tech Talk today, so please feel free to ask any questions you have with the Q&A Zoom feature. We will also have chat enabled today during the session. A recording of this session will be sent to you via email and will be available on NowSecure Academy. We host these Tech Talks monthly, so be sure to check out our replays so far from this year and join us for our August session. With that, Jason, I'm going to hand it over to you to jump into updates that we need to know.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Brendan. Good morning, everybody. Like Brendan mentioned, my name is Jason Ajmo. I am a lead cybersecurity engineer with the MITRE Corporation, as well as the attack for mobile lead on the attack team. And today we're going to be talking about attack for mobile. Kind of just be reintroducing it, going through what it is, why we have it, the different things that we have in attack for mobile, and most importantly, what we've been working on, what we are working on, and how you as the community can get involved. So there we go. Obviously, we're all members of the mobile security community. So when mobile devices were first introduced, they brought a lot of new technology. They're always on us, they're always on, they're always connected to some sort of network. And they have all of these different sensors and applications that are always running, collecting data, and things like that. And this introduced a whole new threat landscape outside of the traditional enterprise computing endpoints. And then over the years, the mobile operating system vendors, Google, Apple, etc., learned lessons based on different threats, vulnerabilities, and things that came up over the years, and added some of the security features that we all know and love today, such as application sandboxing, or ensuring that applications are running in their own runtime environment and they can't interfere with each other or access certain pieces of data on the device. More fine-grained permission controls for users to pick and choose what apps can access what on the device. Curated app stores such as the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store, as well as frequent security updates, as well as longer-term security update support for older devices. And then on the right there, we have a screenshot from NIST 8144, which we'll come back to in a couple slides. But this is basically just an overview of the mobile ecosystem. You have your app stores, your device and vendor infrastructure, your enterprise systems, and then of course the device and the communications networks that are utilized by the devices. So what is attack? At a high level, attack is a knowledge base of adversary behaviors that's based on these 4 core principles listed here. It's based on real world observations. So everything in attack is behavior that we have actually seen happen in the real world. There's nothing theoretical there or anything like that. Attack is free, open, and globally accessible. We will never charge for it. It is open, free on the internet, and it's accessible to anybody all throughout the world. It is a common language, which is one of the big draws to attack, because it allows the security community to talk about threats and adversary behaviors using a common language. And of course, it is community driven. We rely very heavily on the input from the community, especially as the mobile team. We're a little bit smaller than the other attack teams. So we do rely fairly heavily on you, the community's input, which towards the end, we'll talk about how you can get involved and what we look for in the community. So this is what the attack for mobile matrix looks like right now. Across the top, you have your tactics, which are your adversary goals. So just to look through a few of these here, we have initial access, for example, so how the adversary gets initial access to the device. Or you have your defense evasion, how the user or how the adversary rather tries to work around some defenses that may be present on the device. And then in your vertical, you have your techniques, which is how the adversary achieves these goals. So looking at, for example, a few of the defense evasion techniques, You have your hide artifacts. So that's how the user actually hides some of the generated stuff that could be occurring on the device. And then you have right there, we have expanded over on the side, impaired defenses, which is how the adversary can try to hinder some of the defenses baked into these mobile devices. And then you'll see that little gray bar there that we have expanded out with sub techniques, which is also new to Attack for Mobile as of I believe last year, which we'll get to in a little bit as well. But sub techniques just provide additional granularity about the specific technique. So for example, in this case, we have impaired defenses, and our sub techniques, we have prevent application removal. So how the adversary could prevent the app from being removed from the device lockout, which is preventing the user from actually interacting with the device, or disable or modify tools, which is disabling things on the device, such as Google Play Protect or other security tools that may detect the adversary behavior. So looking at one of the techniques here, we have indicator removal on host. This is a technique where, like the name suggests, the adversary tries to delete, alter, or hide generated artifacts on the device. So that can include things like files, whether device is jailbroken or not, or even hiding the application's icon itself, or uninstalling it itself even. So you can see we have our 3 sub techniques here for indicator removal on host. We have uninstall malicious application, which is when the app quite literally uninstalls itself. File deletion, where it can delete files that it generated or other files that could indicate that this malicious behavior is occurring. Or we have disguise root jailbreak indicators, which is more common in malware that attempts to root and or jailbreak the device, which we have frequently seen. And then if we go over to the right there, we have our technique metadata. So we have our technique ID, of course. We have our 3 sub techniques. So the uninstall malicious application, file deletion, and disguise root and jailbreak indicators. We have our tactic type, which in this case is post adversary device access. And just a quick comment on that. The tactic type is kind of like a legacy thing that we still have in Attack for Mobile. This is mostly an artifact from before the sub technique release. Attack for Mobile used to be 2 matrices. So we had the main matrix, which was the post adversary device access matrix, and then we had a separate matrix below it, which covered network-based effects, which we removed. But I'm going to talk about in a few slides that whole refactor that we did there. And of course, you have your tactic in this case, which is defense evasion. You have the relevant platforms, so either Android, iOS, or both. Our MTC ID, which I'm going to come back to in the slide. You have your version and then created and last modified dates, which are common metadata between all attack objects. So I just want to quickly call out here the MTC ID. So the MTC stands for Mobile Threat Catalog. And what the Mobile Threat Catalog is maintained and operated by NIST. It's outlined in the NIST 8144 document, which is where that first screenshot came from. It's public available online. If you Google NIST 8144, you'll find it. And it's kind of similar to ATT&CK in the sense that it's a database of threats to mobile devices, but it's kind of organized in a different way. So where you have ATT&CK is organized by tactic or adversary goal, the Mobile Threat Catalog is actually more organized by category. So for example, it's broken down into things like cellular-based threats, privacy-based threats, application-based threats, and things like that. And the Mobile Threat Catalog is also cool because it maps mobile threats to CVEs. So you can make that link between attack techniques, Mobile Threat Catalog threats, as well as CVEs. And then at the same time, it also helps to enrich Attack for Mobile techniques and kind of provide just additional context and details in a way that Attack for Mobile can't necessarily do. So if you want to check that out, the link's right there, pages.nist.gov/mobile threat catalog. Is similar to ATT&CK. It's also public free. It's all open source on GitHub, and it's also community driven. So coming back to ATT&CK, jumping back to indicator removal on host, which we were just looking at. Now we're going to take a look at the mitigations and detections, which is another two more core components of ATT&CK. So we have our mitigations here, which is how you can mitigate this behavior, or the technique specifically. And then we have our detections, which are how can you detect that this technique is actually occurring on the device. So looking at the mitigations for indicator removal on host, we have attestation, which is a common one that we use. That's things like safety net and other device APIs that can potentially detect unauthorized modifications, such as root or jailbroken devices. Security updates, these commonly provide patches for vulnerabilities that can allow malicious applications to silently root and or jailbreak a device, which allows them to do a whole bunch of other stuff. And then we have user guidance. So one thing that I'll talk about when we get to the detections in a moment is how, just based on the application sandboxing and the restrictions that are imposed to applications running on a device, we kind of had to think about how we scope things, and we ended up having to rely on the users for certain things. So in this case, the mitigation here is informing users that you shouldn't root or jailbreak a device because it can, allow adversaries to take advantage of that level of access without the user's knowledge. And then we have our detections here. So there's a table there that you can see that has data sources and data components. Now this is new. This is what we added this in our last release in April. And what these are is these are concrete places that you can look to actually detect that this behavior is occurring. So you can see we have two data sources here. We have application vetting permissions requests. So that is if you were to run an app through an application vetting service, if you looked at the permissions request section of the output report, that could tell you that this behavior is occurring. So for example, indicator removal on host, this behavior sometimes relies on abuse of the Android accessibility service. So if you see that an app requests access to the accessibility service, that can sometimes be a red flag because that is typically, it can be used, but a lot of the times malicious actors use that to, for example, inject input into the device on behalf of the user. And then we have user interface, which is literally the interface on the device. So the user can see this behavior occurring somehow on their device. And in this instance, system settings is the data component for this one, which means they can look in the system settings to see what has permission to use the accessibility services on the device. So if you're familiar at all with enterprise data sources, we had to kind of, like I mentioned, we had to kind of expand the scope of how we thought about this just because of the restrictions on the device. So we had to start looking to external sources for these data components, such as the application vetting report and the user interface. But at the same time, which is not shown here, we also do utilize more quote unquote traditional enterprise data sources wherever we can. And then below that, you have the actual text for the detection, requesting device administrator permissions and things like that. So that's a technique. Now let's take a look at a software entry. So here you can see we have ATT&CK, which was mobile malware that was first seen in the Google Play Store and third-party app stores in October 2021. It was discovered in 19 apps of which at least 7 abused exploits for obtaining root permissions. So that goes back to what I said before. You have your security updates that a lot of the times patch these vulnerabilities that can be used by either malware and users alike to root or jailbreak their devices. And then similar to the other attack objects, we have our metadata here. So we have our ID, our type, which is either malware or tool. So for example, something like Nmap would be a tool because it's not, it's not generally malware. Platforms like before, Android, iOS are both, and then the same common metadata version created unless modified. And of course, with each software entry, we have our technique mappings. So we also call them procedures, which you can see on the right there, which is a specific implementation of techniques and or sub-techniques. So we could see some of the behaviors here that ATT&CK has. So it can monitor notifications. It can grant itself microphone permissions and record from the microphone, uses shell scripts to aid in the rooting process. And there you can see our impaired defenses that we talked about earlier. On the bottom, ATT&CK can disable play protect to hopefully avoid being detected. So now let's take a step back and let's take a look at what we've done over the last couple of years. Throughout 2021 and into early 2022, we had a big push to refactor the mobile matrix to be more in line with enterprise. What this means is that we basically kind of started from square one took a step back, looked at the mobile matrix, and thought, okay, what can we do to make this look more like enterprise? And this is kind of an artifact of the fact that mobile was kind of developed, attack for mobile rather, was kind of developed in parallel with attack for enterprise as opposed to together. So as a result of that, we ended up with different technique names, kind of inconsistent language between our techniques, different detections and things like that. So our thought process there was if we update it to use as much enterprise content as possible. So reusing technique names, reusing, descriptions wherever possible, that could allow us in the future, if we decided to more easily merge the two matrices, which was a thought that we kind of explored throughout this process that we ultimately decided to not do at this point. But it's something that we're just keeping in the back of our minds in case we do decide to do that. And then throughout that refactoring, we also introduced sub techniques, which we looked at before, which are the more granular details of techniques. And then we also updated, we updated the language, the titles, the descriptions, and everything to be more in line with enterprise. And then we are also, continuing to add new content as well. So software entries, techniques, etc. So what have we done this year? As we saw with the technique that we looked at before, we have implemented data sources, which, like we said, are the concrete places you can look to detect that the behavior is happening. And like we did last year, we're also continuing to add new content, software entries, techniques, things like that. So where are we going? Our big push for this year is, again, more refactoring, of course, to be more in line with enterprise. But our big push this year is adding what we call structured detections. So this is what our detections currently look like. We have our data sources and data components, and then we have just that free blob paragraph text below it. What structured detections do is we're going to take that paragraph below it and basically break it out into its specific data component. So this is an example from enterprise because the mobile data sources are still, or structured detections rather, they're still in draft, so they're not public yet. But basically, we're going to take that paragraph and break it into its relevant data components. And what that's going to allow you to do, it's going to allow you to make that one-to-one connection between the specific detection and the specific data component. So you could see it has that detects label on top there. So you can specifically say, if you look at for example, here, the file metadata, you can specifically detect that behavior right there, as opposed to having to, read the paragraph yourself and make that connection through the data components. So that's our big push right now. We're hoping to release that in the October release. I believe we're on track for that. So that should hopefully be coming out in October. Along, like our other releases, we're also going to be continuing to add new content, new techniques, new software entries and things like that. So the two things I specifically left out here were our groups and campaigns. And if you're familiar with ATT&CK, I'm sure you've heard of those. For the sake of time, I decided to leave those out because they're not very many mobile groups or campaigns at this point. But if you did want to look at those are, of course, publicly available on our website, attack.mitre.org. So that's a little bit about attack for mobile and just attack in general. But I'm just going to go through some of the resources that we have that are not necessarily mobile specific, but just so you as the community are aware of what we have out there. So just kind of working around the slide here, we have our conference talks. So if you've been to just a security conference at all, I'm sure you've heard ATT&CK mentioned. As the ATT&CK team, we've also done a lot of conference talks. So those are all out there on the relevant conference websites. We have, of course, the ATT&CK knowledge base at attack.mitre.org. We have our structured content. So STIX is our JSON data format that actually backs all of ATT&CK. So all of the ATT&CK data is represented in this STIX JSON format, which is all public available on GitHub. We have our taxi server, which is our public-facing server that serves our STIX content. And of course, GitHub, all of our content is free, open source on GitHub, as is a bunch of our tools and websites. On the right there, you have we have tools, of course. That screenshot specifically is from ATT&CK Navigator, which just kind of gives you different options and different ways to just visualize adversaries and software and software techniques and things like that. So you can see there's all that highlighting and that shows behaviors. And some other attack resources we have adversary emulation plans. So this one, for example, APT3, which was used in an attack evaluation. Attack evaluations are where we take the list of security vendors that signed up, and we basically run adversary emulations against each security product. And we publish the results just about their technique coverage, how they were able to detect, respond, all that. Again, that's all available online. And then we have Caldera, which is our automated adversary emulation tool. This is also available on GitHub along with different plugins for it, things like that. So now the important part, how can you get involved as the security community? So like I mentioned, attacks, mobile especially, is very community driven. We're a small team, so we rely very heavily on community input. So what are we looking for from you? Feedback, of course. What are we doing well? What can we do better? We create this content for the community, so we want to know from the community, well, how can we make it better to better serve you guys? Contributions, the more content, the better, of course. We can't see everything. We don't have visibility into everything. So any technique write-ups, software write-ups, anything like that, even just sending us links, that's all extremely helpful to us. And then, of course, community engagement. We want to understand how you utilize attack, because a lot of the times, if you don't tell us, we will never know. So if you tell us how you use attack, or if you want to talk about how you can use attack, we're always happy to have those conversations. And like I said, we like to know how people are using the content that we're putting out, so we can better curate it for the community. And that's pretty much all I had. So here is our contact information. You have, of course, our website, the main attack inbox, which goes to the whole team, our Twitter handle, and then my contact information if you ever want to reach out to me directly to talk about anything mobile related, my email, my Twitter handle, and my LinkedIn. So thank you all for listening. And yeah, Brendan, is there any questions?
Yeah, Jason, that was awesome. Thank you so much for all the updates.
Yeah.
We do have one question in chat that says, to add additional security on our mobile apps, we are looking at biometric and PIN code for non-biometric supported devices. Do we have any standards to follow for passcode, PIN, like 4 or 6 digit, etc.? Is that something that is covered in the attack framework?
So standards isn't really something that we cover in the attack framework. I know NIST, of course, puts out a lot of documents on standards. I don't know if they've done one for mobile specific stuff like PIN code standards. I would definitely recommend looking at NIST resources, because they usually are the ones that put out the kind of standards that you'd be looking for.
Awesome. And then one other question that we had is, how have you seen folks adopt the framework for mobile successfully? Like, have you talked to folks who have done this and implemented this in a way that's impactful? Yeah.
So we've talked a bit with the mobile community over the years. Like I mentioned, community driven, trying to understand how people use what we're putting out. We see it used in 2 major ways. We see it used in mobile security products, so like mobile threat defense. A lot of this, we've seen some vendors actually map threats to attack for mobile as they're occurring, which was kind of cool. And then we've also seen it used by app vetting vendors. So they'll run their analysis on the app and then map relevant tactics and techniques to it.
Awesome. Cool. So that's it from the Q&A side. I will throw out a couple quick plugs before we end the session today. As I said at the top, a recording of this session and all of the sessions that we've done this year and last year actually are available on academy.nowsecure.com. You can sign up for a NowSecure Academy account completely for free. And there's a ton of mobile app security training for development and security professionals there. So if you are looking for a place to learn more about mobile AppSec, we have that as a free resource along with our resource center you can find on nowsecure.com. Both of those have tons of resources for mobile app security upskilling. And with that, Jason, I want to say thank you for joining us, for joining and leading us for this session today. And for the folks joining, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Have a good one, everybody.
Thanks all.